Shalom, shalom. Shalom. How brothers doing out there, man? If everybody can hear the sound okay, just put Khan in the comment box, please. Again, if you can hear the sound okay, just put Khan in the comment box for us. Zebulon Rockers, I appreciate it. Thank you. So tonight's class is going to be a presentation by the captain from New York, Mala'ak, entitled Feathered Crowns. He's going to be going over some archaeology and Northern Kingdom history and stuff like that. So please have your notepads and your pens available to take notes, man. This should be a fabulous presentation that the brother's doing. Also, soldiers and cadets, you got another test coming soon. The brother Pawar, Sergeant Pawar out of Cleveland, is going to be giving a presentation on the shield next Thursday. The pomegranate, what you see right here. Going to be clearing some things up with this. So you brothers be out on the lookout for that. I got a presentation coming dealing with Esau's blessing, going a little bit in depth with Alexander the Greek and some of the history and prophecies in the Bible from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 20, 26, 27, and 28, along with some other chapters in the Bible. And then soon after that, Mala'ak and myself have a presentation for you brothers. We're working on for, Second Ezra, chapter 11 and 12. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to the captain and let him get into the presentation for you brothers. Shalom, and thank you, brothers, for your patience with us getting everything set up.
Shalom, shalom. You can hear me, Adawan?
Khan, Lord Khan, I can hear you.
Okay. So, everybody's on? You have enough people on?
Khan, we got a handful of brothers on. We got some push-ups that we got to administer because I see some brothers lacking, but we got a handful of brothers on.
All right. If I click on live comments, do I see comments? Everybody comments or no? No, I guess not.
You should.
Okay, yeah. Never mind. I do. I see. All right, shalom Makim. So this is I'm bringing out a presentation that I started working on about 1.5 years ago, right? And I put it on hold. And so as of late, I've been just adding more stuff to it, right? So I said to brothers, I believe it was the last time we had AOC University class, that I was gonna bring this presentation out. I haven't brought it out. I plan on bringing it out openly, most high willing, when we rent out a venue or something, have an event. But I wanted to show it to my immediate brothers within AOC first and foremost. So it's regarding the Northern Kingdom, right? So I'll be going into prophecy and how it fits so-called, Latinos of native descent, of Negro descent, the North American Indians of the Americas, right? Especially now that there's a lot of chaos going on over who's Israel and who's not. It's like it resurfaces every 5 to 6 months. People going back and forth on social media over these people are Israelites and these people are not. You got so-called Latinos saying that the so-called Negroes are Canaanites, and you got so-called Negroes saying that the natives are Hamites and Edomites. So it's a bunch of madness. So I think this presentation here is on time. So, and it's 91 PowerPoint slides. So I don't know if I'll get through it, but I'll try to bring out as many slides as I can in a timely fashion and order. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Abiyashaya, Babu Shah, let me know if you see my presentation.
Con, I got it. I see it. I'm about to add it to the stream.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, let me know when you want me to. But I do see it though.
You see the slides moving?
Do it again. Yeah, Con, I see him.
Okay, it's moving kind of slow, but at least it's moving.
Con.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead. If you want, you can mute your laptop. I don't want.
I'm going dark, King.
Yeah, do you think? So this presentation is titled Feathered Crowns, right? Because this presentation just showing that the so-called natives and so-called Latinos of native indigenous descent and Negro descent, we're kings right alongside our so-called West Indians and Judite brothers. We're all kings. We're all one and the same. So this is the title, Feathered Crowns. In a couple of the clips, couple of the slides is going to be video clips. So when I play the video, make sure your volume is up, because I'm not sure if the volume within the video clips that I'll play are going to be loud enough. So beginning with slide number 1. So the first time I did a presentation, right, going against some people pushing the notion that the natives are not Israelites, was a few years ago, and it's on YouTube. It's called AOC Israelites Mala'ak Dismantles Whited Out 4 documentary, because it's a fugazi and bogus documentary with no real information, trying to say that the natives and Latinos are not Israelites. So I already did a presentation. This is the title of it. So here I am again, back to it. All right, so here we go. You see the title in here, Indians and Mexicans Not Israelites. So it's a brother that put this video out, and I just want to showcase the ignorance of some of the people within our own community, right? With all the information that's out there for us to search up and to read and to inform ourselves, there's so many within our community that don't bother to do unbiased research and end up saying things like what this man is about to say. And when I play the video, let me know in the comment section if everybody can hear. I'll be let me know if everybody can hear or not, because I can't see the comment section.
Brothers are saying they can't hear, King.
All right, I'm gonna let it play out and then I'll see what he said. Can they hear now?
Brothers are saying they can't hear.
All right. All right, so since y'all can't hear, I'm just gonna say what this brother in particular is saying. So he goes on to say that the northern kingdom could not be within the Americas because the scriptures say that he's gonna gather the remnant of Israel from Shinar, from Elam, from Egypt, from Cush, right? And now in this second clip, he goes on to say that the so-called Aztecs, the Mexicans, they were never raped, they were never enslaved. Then he goes on to say that even if your father is an Israelite, but your mother is a heathen, you're still not an Israelite. And he continues on to say that no Israelite king, right, had a son that sat on the throne who had a heathen mother. But he was mistaken because we all know that King Solomon's son, who sat on the throne after him, had a mother who was an Ammonite. She was of the nation of Ammon. So this particular brother here made three very huge mistakes regarding what he's teaching about the Northern Kingdom. I wish I could have recorded it with the audio higher so everybody can hear. So he's saying that, you know, if an Israelite man has a child with a heathen woman, the child is considered a bastard. So therefore, no righteous Israelite king had a heathen wife. But yet Solomon's son who sat on the throne had an Ammonite mother. And he said that to say that, you know, natives and Latinos are bastards, not Israel. Now, we can go to this scripture, to Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 6-8. For there shall be a day that the watchmen upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, and let us go up to Zion unto the Lord our power. For thus saith the Lord, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of nations. Publish ye, praise ye, and say, O Lord, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coasts of the earth. From the coasts of the earth. So no, the northern kingdom is not just scattered in Egypt and Hamath and Elam and in Assyria, as that particular brother was trying to say. James 1 and 1. James, the servant of the Most High and of the Lord Yahushua Mashiach, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So these are just two out of many scriptures that show that the nation of Israel is scattered throughout the four corners of earth, and the northern kingdom as well, and that the northern kingdom is not solely in those areas that he tried to say. Because you have many people that say the northern kingdom did not come over here to the Americas, they still over there in the Middle East. Scripture says something different. Now, as far as a child being a bastard, if he has a heathen mother but an Israelite father, therefore many Latinos can be Israelites, right? But here's 1 Kings 14:21. And Rehoboam, the son of Judah, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. So this is Solomon's son Rehoboam, right? Rehoboam was 40 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah and Ammonitis. So if a man has a heathen mother and is considered a bastard, then how come Solomon allowed his son to sit on the throne? Israel would have been going crazy, would have went ballistic. But no, he wasn't considered a bastard because his father was still an Israelite. Exodus 2:21, Chronicles 23 and 14. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. So this is Moses marrying a woman of the nation of Midian, and she gave him sons. But now check this out. In Chronicles 23, it says, now concerning Moses, the man of God, his sons were named of the tribe of Levi. The sons of Moses were Gershom and Eleazar. So if they were bastards because they had a heathen mother, why are they written down on record as being from the tribe of Levi? So there goes a cut to that doctrine. Okay, now let's get into it. So this is the Tribal College Journal of American Indian Higher Education. So volume 28, this was published in the fall of 2016, and it was reviewed by Colin G. Calloway, PhD, Professor of Native American Studies and History at Dartmouth College, right? So we're going to begin to go through some of the curses, because many say that the natives don't fit the curses, the Latinos don't fit the curses. Okay, let's see what the history says. It says Indian slavery, like war and disease, exacted a terrible toll in the 17th century. The English kidnapped Indians during the early contacts, but the Pequot War in 1636 through 1637 provided the first opportunity to acquire Indian captives in large numbers and justify their enslavement, initiating and shaping a labor system that would characterize New England society for over 150 years. Indeed, Neville argues the English and their Indian allies made taking captive the war's main purpose. Pequots were condemned to slavery in New England, the Caribbean, and elsewhere. More than 2,000 Indians were taken captive during King Philip's War. Roughly 500 were shipped to global slave markets. So here you have natives being shipped globally. and ended up laboring on plantations in Jamaica and Bermuda, rowing galleys in the Mediterranean. Natives were being tossed on ships and taken as far as the Mediterranean, or building forts in Morocco. So native Indians were being taken as far as Morocco. The rest were distributed among English colonists who took more captives in wars against the Abenakis. When the supply of wartime captives dried up, New Englanders imported Indian slaves from the Carolinas and Florida, or transformed free Indians into unfree labor judicial enslavement. So here we have in the history that Indians were taken as far as the Mediterranean and to Morocco by the thousands. That sounds like they fit Deuteronomy 28 to me. And we have to understand that the curses wasn't just a one-time thing. Anytime Israel went astray from the Most High, the curses came into play. So this is a book called Brethren by Nature, and that's actually where the source for that article comes from. It's Margaret Ellen Neville. This is a great book to get. Brethren by Nature, New England Indians, Colonists, and the Origins of American Slavery. Because we have to keep in mind that American slavery started with the natives. So now going into this book. This is probably my first or my second book that I purchased 9 years ago when I came into the faith. So it's Bartolome de las Casas, an account much briefly abbreviated of the destruction of the Indies with related texts. So Bartolome de las Casas was a Spanish friar who was an eyewitness to the atrocities that were being committed against the natives within the Caribbean and Central America. Let's see what he says. So now this is page 68, right? So let's read Deuteronomy 28:68. Slave ships. Well, we don't have to read that particular scripture because we all know or should know what Deuteronomy 28:68 says. So let's read this excerpt from the book. It says, and with only this, I would conclude this relation of their wretchedness and ferocity, that since they entered into these lands until today, that is 16 years, they have sent many ships loaded and filled with Indians over the sea to be sold for slaves in Santa Marta and on the island of Hispaniola in Jamaica and the island of San Juan. This is above 1 million Indians. And even today, in the year 1542, they still send them. So now in his account, he said over 1 million Indians were thrown on slave ships. So as scriptures say, 2 or 3 witnesses so far pulled. This is the second witness, the second account showing natives being shipped on cargo slave ships. This here is from the Library of Congress, Native Americans enslaved by Spaniards, published in 1592. That's where this image could be found, in the Library of Congress. And this is the excerpt. It says, and they would put them in chains so that they would not leave behind the burdens weighing 3 arrobas that he set upon their backs. And it fell out one time, of the many times that he did this, that of 4,000 Indians, not 600 alive to their houses, for he left them all dead upon the roads. For when some would grow tired, and their feet be tired and bloody from the great burdens, and they would sicken from the hunger and hard labor and weakness, so as not to unshackle them from the chains, he would cut off their heads at the neck. So when the natives would be tired and exhausted from carrying these heavy loads on their back, he wouldn't unchain them. Too much work. So what would he do? He would chop off their heads. And the head would fall to one side and the body to the other. Now let's go. This is the story of Queen Anacaona. which was a Taino princess. So this is The Massacre of the Queen and Her Subjects by Jules Van Wing, published in 1598 in the Brevísima Relación de la Destrucción de las Indias, written by Bartolomé de las Casas. So here you have, women, old men, children being burned alive, the queen being hung, and in the background you see the Spaniards slaughtering the native Tainos. Here you have Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, is within the same book. What do you see here? Hard labor. So who can say the natives were never enslaved? Who can really say the natives never went through any of the curses? Deuteronomy 28 and 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant the vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. So we're going into another curse, right? It says, you shall have a wife, and another man is going to take her from you. So this is page 43 of the same book. It says, he, Pedro de Alvarado, would unmarry and steal from the married men their wives and daughters and give them to sailors and soldiers so as to make them happy and to take them into his armadas. He swelled the ships with Indians where all would perish of thirst and hunger. Oh, how many orphans did he make? How many fathers did he rob of their children? And how many men stripped of their wives? How many women leave without their husbands? How many acts of adultery and rapine and savagery was he the cause and reason of? So here we have an account of the wives of native men being stripped from them by Alvarado and given to other men. And their wives were being raped and ravished. That lines up perfect with Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 30. It says, thou shalt be a wife, and another man shall lie with her. And another man shall lie with her. So there we have another curse that lines up with native history. Let's go. Deuteronomy 28 and 49. It says, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young, because when the Spaniards came, they had no mercy. Man, woman, child, gender, whether male or female, no mercy. Now, to prove my point earlier that the curses are repetitive, that they didn't just happen one time, we'll see how this curse happened during the time of kings, and then it replayed later on when the natives came across the Spaniards. So 2 Kings 8 and 12, and it reads, and Hazael said, why weepeth my Lord? And he answered, because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and wilt dash their children, and rip up their women with child. So, if you go to 2 Kings chapter 8, you'll get more of a context of what's going on. But we see here that this man, Hazael, when he comes into power, he was slaying Israel with the sword, and he was dashing our children, and he was ripping up our Israelite women while pregnant. That was one of the curses. That was done against the northern kingdom. So Hazael, the Assyrian, committed those acts when he came into power. He did it against the northern kingdom. And then fast forward to the 1500s, It happened to the Northern Kingdom all over again. So watch how Deuteronomy 28:49, 2 Kings 8 and 12 lines up perfect with page 70 of the book Destruction of the Indies. And it reads, in another village, as it appeared to them that the villagers did not come forth readily as they might, owing to the infamies and heinous deeds that they had heard told of the Spaniards, they put to the sword and spear children and adults, babes and old persons, subjects and lords alike, and showed no mercy to none. See how that lines up with 28 and 49? It says they showed no mercy to none. Children, adults, babes, and old persons. In 28 and 49, it says they shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young. And this photo here is Bartolome de las Casas drew this up. And what do you see here? They're babes being dashed against the rocks. Exactly how it happened in 2 Kings 8 and 12 towards the Northern Kingdom. It happened all over again when the Spaniards came. Okay. You have Hosea chapter 13. Speaks of the iniquity of Ephraim. Verse 13. The sorrows of a travailing woman shall come upon him. He is an unwise son, for he shall not stay long in the place of the breaking forth of children. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be thy plague. O grave, I will be thy destruction. Repentance shall be hid from mine eyes. I'm going to skip to 16. Samaria shall become desolate, for she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their children shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child be ripped up. So here we have Hosea chapter 13, once again reiterating that the Northern Kingdom woman, and specifically Ephraim, our babies would be dashed against the rocks into pieces, and our woman would be ripped up. So let's go back to that previous slide. What do you see the Spaniard doing to a native child? He's about to dash him to pieces against the rocks. So Deuteronomy 28 and 49, it happened in 2 Kings. It happened when you read Hosea, and it happened once when the Spaniards came to the islands. So far, to me, it looks like we're fitting the curses. So this is page 9. It says they would enter into the villages and spare not children or old people or pregnant women or women with suckling babes, but would open their woman's belly and hack the babe to pieces as though they were butchering lambs shut up in their pen. So you see that? So he documented in page 9 what was prophesied in Deuteronomy 28 and 49, what happened in 2 Kings, and what was prophesied in Hosea chapter 13. And these particular curses here was aimed at the Northern Kingdom. Okay, now this is a book called California. Exterminate Them. Written accounts of the murder, rape, enslavement of Native Americans during the California Gold Rush. Is forwarded by Edward D. Castillo. So I'm gonna be reading excerpt from page 8. Let's see what it says. It says, despite the Spanish system or coercion, Indians resisted foreign domination, sometimes subtly, other times violently. In the missions, Native Americans occasionally disregarded orders or instructions given by the priests. Although Indians learned the Spanish language, and various other tenets of Catholicism, they frequently retain their native languages, religious beliefs, rituals, ceremonies, songs, and oral narratives. Young Native American men defied the strict gender segregated living because um, the Edomites did not want the native population to continue to increase, so they would separate the native men from the native women. But the native men would sneak off to their women anyway. So it says, the segregated living conditions at the missions slipping into the manjarios or dormitories of young Indian women. Sometimes women escape their nightly imprisonment to be with friends and families they love. Now, here's the kicker, right? Because a lot of the people that say, you know, the Indians were exterminated, or the so-called Latinos today and so-called natives today are product of rape. So they're all descendant of the rape of the Spaniards. It would be incorrect, because check one of the things that these native women used to do, highlighted in red. It says native women defied the church by aborting babies conceived by being raped by soldiers, civil officials, or priests. So anytime that native women were being raped by these Edomites, they were aborting those babies. So for one to say that so-called Latinos and so-called natives are the byproduct of Spaniard rape, no, you're incorrect. Native women were aborting those Spaniard babies.
Salak, out of one, what you just brought out that goes into that scripture in Hosea chapter 9 and 14, where it says, "Give them, O Lord, what wilt thou give? Give them a miscarrying womb and dry breast." And not only was the Most High causing it, but from the information you brought out, our foremothers were doing it on their own also.
Gone. They would never bring that information out. Why? Because here's the thing. If you're so biased in what you present, your sole focus is to downplay the history of these particular people, right? As opposed to saying, you know what? All right, let me see if I am wrong. Let me look up their history. Let me look up their customs. Let me look up their traditions. Let me see if what they went through fits what we went through, and see if it fits what the curses say Israel will go through. Do they do that? Obviously not. Okay, so now this is on the New Kingdom of Grenada, which is Colombia. This is page 78, right, of the book. I'm reading to the right first. It says, the witness in that trial do attest that all that kingdom was at peace, serving the Spaniards, with the Indians giving the Spaniards food from their laborers constantly, and tilling their fields and doing other things, and bringing them much gold and gems, emeralds, and all that they had and could. So the Spaniards had the natives on their own land, on native land, tilling their food and giving it all to the Spaniards. It says, giving the Spaniards food from their labors constantly, and tilling their fields and doing other things. Now, match that with Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 33. It says, the fruit of thy land and all thy labors. There goes that word labor. Oh, what a coincidence. Shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt be only oppressed and crushed away. You see how that curse fits so perfectly, is so in line with this eyewitness account of what was being done to the natives? says, the fruit of thy land and all thy labors shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up. And in this account, it said the witness in that trial do attest that all the kingdom was at peace serving the Spaniards, with the Indians giving the Spaniards food from their labors constantly, and tilling their fields and doing other things and bringing them much gold and gems and emeralds. So that matches up and links up with Deuteronomy 28 and 33. There goes another curse. Moving forward. Okay, so far, right? It says Northern Kingdom is still in the east. Only Judah was brought to America and scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Cut. Because that's what the brother in the video was saying. Only Judah was scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Every other tribe is still in the Middle East and in Africa. So that's been cut. Okay. If an Israelite has a child with a heathen woman, the child is considered a bastard and cannot enter the camp. I already cut that. None of King Solomon's children were accepted into the congregation if they had heathen mothers. Scriptures do not record him having children with heathen women. That's what that brother said in the video. That was cut because I showed how Rehoboam's mom was an Ammonite. Okay, native Indians were never slaves, never made to do free slave labor, never lynched, never burned alive. The women were never raped, and pregnant native women never had their babies cut out of their stomach. That's another thing that the brother was saying in the video that I was trying to show brothers earlier, but the audio was too low. But in that video, if you see the title, you could YouTube it for yourself. It should still be on YouTube. So he said that, but the information says otherwise. So that was cut. Moving on. So I blocked this brother's last name because I didn't. When I present it, I don't want to give the brother shine, but I will put him up on the Summer Jam screen. So I had a little dialogue with this particular brother here, and his argument for the natives not being Israelites is that native tribes had the so-called Negroes in slavery, right? You had the Cherokee, the Choctaw, Cherokee, Choctaw, and three other tribes out of the 500 sub-tribes within the Americas, right? So this is what he says. And actually, this meme, this picture right here is actually used by a lot of people that try to say the natives are not Israelites. So it says, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. Okay. So he's trying to apply this towards natives enslaving, the so-called Negroes, right? But check this out. So this is the meme that they use. This is called meme scholarship. So we're going to ignore the fact that in ancient times, Israel fought against one another when the kingdom split. We're going to ignore in scripture when Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom were killing one another and holding each other hostage, right? We're going to ignore the fact that when Israel goes off, we fall under the curses and all these things happen. We're going to ignore the fact that the scripture that says the man that is tender and delicate among you, even his eye shall be evil towards his brother. That's one of the curses. But I guess we're just going to ignore that and say, because the natives, some natives had Negroes enslaved, they couldn't possibly be Israelites. But there's two things wrong with that. There's two things wrong with that. And I'm going to bring it out. So check this. This is a screenshot. So he says your entire fake doctrine is based on scripture that the Northern Kingdom walked from the Euphrates to Arsareth, America, in 1.5 years, even though it took 40 years for Israel to walk from Egypt to the Promised Land. So your vacation Bible school antics don't mean shit over here. How did you determine that these white people are Israel when they and their seed have determined that they are white and from the seed of the Spaniards? Right? Then he puts up this bogus chart over here, right? So, two things. I don't know if you noticed. He said the entire fake doctrine is that the northern kingdom walked from the Euphrates to Osiris. Point number one, we do not teach that the northern kingdom walked from the Euphrates to Osiris. We teach that many came to Osiris by way of ships and not all in one single trip. Point two, the comparison made of Israel taking a year and a half to reach Osiris to it taking Israel 40 years to walk to Egypt is ridiculous. For the fact that the only reason it took the Israelites 40 years to reach the promised land was because they were made to circle the wilderness for 40 years until a generation of people pass away, not due to the distance. So that comparison he made no sense. 3, the issue of most so-called Puerto Ricans being white or descendants of Spaniards will be addressed towards the end of the PowerPoint. That part I'll address towards the end. So you see a lot of these brothers that teach against, the so-called natives being Israelites, so-called Latinos being Israelites. These are some of the bogus points they make. The man actually said, how could they have walked to America in just a year and a half when it took Israel 40 years to walk into Israel from Egypt? Well, we don't say they walked. They got on ships. 2, as I said, the only reason it took Israel 40 years to reach Israel is because the Most High had them circling the wilderness. Moving on. So this here is called Body of Liberties, right? A few years after the conclusion of the war in 1641, the colonists of Massachusetts Bay passed the first formal law regulating slavery in English America in a section of the longer document known as Body of Liberties. So brothers and sisters could look this up. It's called Body of Liberties. It says the section's language allowed enslavement of those lawful captives taken in just wars and such strangers as willingly sell themselves or, and those aren't typos. This is old English that this is how they had it written. Willingly sell themselves or are sold to us and left room for legal bondage of others the authorities might deem enslaved in the future. The Body of Liberties codified the colonists' possession of native workers and opened the door for the expansion of African enslavement. So as I stated earlier, the transatlantic slave trade, those doors were opened by the enslavement of natives within the Americas. Continuing on, right? So now, one of the arguments made, as I stated a couple minutes ago, well, the natives can't be Israelites because the Cherokee, Choctaw, the Creek, some Seminole, and Chickasaw had Negroes as slaves. Let's continue on. Let's see if that argument holds true, if it's valid, right? And I'll show the hypocrisy and the double standard of people who use that argument. Because guess what? Judah had Judah in slavery. Judah had Levi in slavery. Levi had Benjamin in slavery. And that's documented. So are you going to say, oh, one Negro man that had another Negro man in slavery, he wasn't an Israelite because he did that? No, you can't say that. He's off for doing that, enslaving his own brother, but that doesn't mean that he's not an Israelite. So this is the root 100 amazing facts about the Negro. Number 21. Did black people own slaves too? If so, why? This is you can find this on the root.com article by Henry Louis Gates Jr. So it reads, one of the most vexing questions in African American history is whether free African Americans themselves owned slaves. The short answer to this question, as you might suspect, is yes, of course. So freed Judites did have other freed Judites as slaves. So what are we going to say? If the natives had some Negroes as slaves, so that means they're not Israelites. So what are we going to say about Judah that had Judah in slavery? So continuing on. Some free black people in this country bought and sold other black people and did so at least since 1654, continuing to do so right through the Civil War. For me, the really fascinating question about black slave owning are how many black masters were involved, how many slaves did they own, and why did they own slaves? The answers to these questions are complex, and historians have been arguing for some time over whether free blacks purchased family members as slaves in order to protect them, motivated on the one hand by benevolence and philanthropy, as historian Carter G. Woodson put it, or whether, on the other hand, they purchased other black people as an act of exploitation, primarily to exploit their free labor for profit, just as white slave owners did. The evidence shows that, unfortunately, both things are true. So, evidence shows that there were two cases, two primary reasons why freed black men and freed black women would purchase their own brothers into bondage. Sometimes it would be their family members. They would buy them, so they know that their family members are safe because they're with them. And then the other case was you had other freed black men that would buy their own people just to exploit them for free labor. So this was going on all around the board. So the sources up there, the root.com, 100 amazing facts about the Negro, number 21. So if you're going to say that the natives in totality are not Israelites because some of them had some black men in slavery, right? So-called Negroes in slavery, then let's stick to that all around the board. Let's not be biased about it. Now this here, who's in these photos? You have Marie Therese Coin and Claude Thomas Pierre Metayor. And on the right, Nicholas Augustine Metayor. Who are these people? So this is from Hutchinson Center for African and African American Research. So that's the source, and it can be found at oxfordaasc.com. It's a lot of slides to go through, but if you go to the site, you see that this was a particular family who became rich off of enslaving their own people. Does that mean they weren't Israelites? No. They were Israelites, but they were wicked. Okay, one of my favorite books. This is a book I suggest that all you brothers purchase. It's not an expensive book, and it will shed much light on the relationship between the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom within the Americas. So it's by William Lauren Katz, Black Indians, A Hidden Heritage. There's a lot of gems in this book. So now this is page 106 and page 108. Oh, and by the way, real quick, those 5 so-called tribes, right? The Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw. Let me go back a couple slides. So the Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, Chickasaw, and Seminole, right? When you actually do the research and see who are the ones who were enslaving the so-called Negro, you find out that they were white men going under the guise of Native Americans. Because at that particular time, right, during the 1600s, you had white men claiming to be Cherokee, claiming to be Choctaw. Why? So they can receive some of the benefits, some of the free land given back. So you had a lot of white men claiming to be from these tribes, and they were the ones enslaving black men, women, and children. It was not the actual Indians. It was white men going under the guise on paper as Indians. Just wanted to bring that out as well. Okay. So page 106 and 108. It says when Spain ordered a counterattack on Georgia in 1742, their armed forces included a black regiment and Negro commanders clothed in lace, bearing the same rank as white officers. The British concluded they had more to worry about from this force starting a slave revolt in Georgia than from anything Spanish troops might do. At around this time, British colonists in the southern colonies began introducing the practice of African slavery among neighboring Native Americans. They concentrated on the 5 civilized nations, those 5 tribes that I stated before, the Cherokees, Chickasaws, Choctaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, as the largest body of Indians present on their borders. Their aim was to make their slave property more secure by making Indians partners in their systems. Indians who accepted slavery would not take in runaways fleeing European slave masters. So the Europeans were trying to get these 5 tribes into slavery, into owning slaves. Reading on. Except for the Seminoles, the 5 civilized nations began to accept the foreign idea of slavery. Even so, their idea of how it should work differed from the British practices. Quaker slaveholder John Bartram, botanist to the King of England, visited some Indian owners in 1770. So this white man visited some of these tribes to see how is it that these tribes are treating the quote unquote slaves that they bought from the Europeans. So it says he visited some Indian owners, slave owners in 1770. Watch this. He found their slaves dressed better than the chief, married into the nation easily, and their children were free and considered in every respect equal to the other members. After a visit to the Creeks, Bartram wrote, I saw in every town in the nation I visited captives, some extremely aged, who were free and in as good circumstances as their masters, and all slaves have their freedom when they marry, which is permitted and encouraged. They and their offspring are in every way upon an equality with their conquerors. So any time that the Europeans will bring, you know, our Southern Kingdom enslaved brothers and sisters to the natives, yes, the natives, some of these tribes would buy them, yes, but they would assimilate them into their nation. It'll elaborate further. Continued, but how did Native Americans view the way Europeans treated their African prisoners? Question mark. Says 2 European missionaries trying to convert the Delaware nation returned rejected, but with this report on the Delaware response to their plea. So these Delaware missionaries came to the natives to try to convert them to Christianity. And so the natives were seemingly joy, but this is their reply. This is what the Indians said to these European missionaries. It says, "They rejoiced exceedingly at our happiness and thus being favored by the Great Spirit, and felt very grateful that we had considered to remember our brethren in the wilderness, but they could not help recollecting that we had a people among us, whom because they differed from us in color, we had made slaves of, and made them suffer great hardships and lead miserable lives. Now they could not see any reason, if a people being black entitled us then to deal with them, why a red color should not equally qualify the same treatment. They therefore determined to wait to see whether all black people amongst us were made thus happy and joyful before they would put confidence in our promises. For they thought a people who had suffered so much and so long by our means should be entitled to our first attention, and therefore they had sent back the two missionaries with many thanks, promising that when they saw black people among us restored to freedom and happiness, they would gladly receive our missionaries. Typo. Page 109. In treaty after treaty, Southern colonists made native nations promise to return fugitive slaves. In 1721, the five civilized nations solemnly a governor of Virginia to deliver slaves, but nothing happened. The British complained on behalf of their slave owners. The chiefs apologized, and the ex-slaves became a part of Native American life. When angry slave hunters decided to take matters into their own hands, they met fierce opposition. In 1750, Captain Tobias Fitch sent off a posse of 5 to retrieve a slave living in the Creek Nation. A Creek chief stood between them and the black man, cutting their rope and threw it in a fire. Then he warned them his villagers had as many guns as they did. The posse returned empty-handed, but happy to be alive. So the notion that the real natives were enslaving their own people is a farce, because what they were doing, they were bringing in their enslaved brothers and they were protecting them from the so-called white man, from the Europeans. Why don't they bring that part out? Why is everybody saying that the natives can't be Israelites because they had, the so-called Negroes and slaves as slaves? But wait, read further into the history, see what they were actually doing. They were keeping them away from the Europeans because they seen how the Europeans were treating them. Now watch what's starting to happen. So this is in page 33. In 1522, Europeans in the Americas first learned that slavery did not easily lead to enormous wealth. On Christmas Day, African and Indian slaves on a plantation owned by Diego Columbus rose and murdered their masters and overseers. Nearby Native American rebels joined the rebels. The beautiful island of Hispaniola, which is modern-day Dominican Republic, shook with the first recorded slave rebellion in the New World. So the first slave rebellion to ever take place in the island of Haiti/Dominican Republic was done hand in hand by Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom. It says the conspiracy has spread across the sprawling sugar plantations in the weeks before Christmas. Patiently, the plotters waited until Christmas Day, when the planters and their families would be bloated with food, soaked with liquor, and too weak or sleepy to offer much resistance. Then they struck, plunging into the night to kill whites and find freedom. I'm gonna skip down. It says masters and slaves learned some important lessons from this first bloody confrontation. Enslaving Indians and Africans was not going to be free from pain. Masters in a slave land would not sleep easily each night. Europeans concluded it was absolutely necessary to remain armed and check this out, and use one race to fight the other. A French colonial dispatch later in the century put the matter simply: The law is hard, but it is both wise and necessary in the land of 15 slaves to one white. Between the two races, we cannot dig too deep a gulf. So there you have it. What started happening? Because Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom, the so-called natives and the so-called Negro, teamed up to rebel against the white Europeans, and they were winning. They were slaughtering them. So what happened? Esau, with his cunning ways, he said, "You know what? We got to put them two against one another. There's not a gulf too deep for us to dig between them." So now the Europeans started thinking of ways to make Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom fight against one another and ignore their enemy, their common enemy, which is what goes on today. Continued. I'm going to read the red highlighted portion. It says the European policy of divide and conquer that began on Christmas Day 1522 introduced elements of deep division to the Americas. So this has always been Esau's tactic, to divide and conquer. Okay, so I'm going to read just the red highlighted portion. I'm going to speed it up a little bit. It says it was in Mexico that Europeans made the strongest effort to keep Africans apart from Native Americans. Black men, for the most part, outnumbered their women and so sought Indian wives. A Native American wife meant if she was free, that children born to her would be free, not slaves. So extensive was the contact between the red and black people that Spanish law prohibited the two races from living together or marrying. So it got to the point where Esau made laws that prohibited black and brown, northern and southern kingdom to marry and to come together. It says as early as 1523, Hernando Cortez was given a royal order to keep Indians in their villages apart from Africans at all costs. Why? Divide and conquer. I'm going to go down to the red highlighted portion. It says the genetic blending of the two peoples clearly weakened the control Europeans wanted over their slaves. Europeans feared any dark person might be a slave, driven to the desperation or out of revenge. One lived in constant fear, wrote a Spanish colonist. So now this here is in page 38, and it's entitled America. This antique French engraving shows African and Native American people living in harmony and in happiness in their own villages. This is page 38. And here you see the natives, you see the northern and southern kingdom, in their villages dwelling together, feasting, dancing, and it's documented. But this is the side that won't be brought out when those who say the natives are not Israelites are busy saying the natives were enslaving the people who y'all say are their brothers. Okay, let's get back to the curses. So this is newsweek.com/Native Americans were kept slaves too, right? So we're going to read. It says California may have entered the Union as a free soil state, but American settlers soon discovered that the buying and selling of Indians was a common practice there. As early as 1846, the first American commander of San Francisco acknowledged that certain persons had been and still are imprisoning and holding to service Indians against their will, and warned the general public that the Indian population must not be regarded in the light of slaves. His pleas went unheeded. I'm gonna skip down to the red highlighted portion. It reads, according to one scholarly estimate, this act may have affected as many as 20,000 California Indians, including 4,000 children kidnapped from their parents and employed primarily as domestic servants and farm laborers. So here you have thousands of children being separated from their parents. Deuteronomy 28:32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. So here you have this curse coming into play. This is another curse that the natives experienced. Moving on. Now, Deuteronomy 28:16. It says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, right? So I'm going to fast forward to more current times, and then I'm going to jump back into native history. So I'm going to be going back and forth now. So it says, why aren't more people talking about Latinos killed by police? It says, as videos of Alton Sterling and Fernando Castillo, two African-American men shot and killed by police last week, went viral, and the names became hashtags. Many for Latinos who were killed by officers that same week. Organizations like the Council of La Raza, Voto Latino, and even Black Lives Matter are raising awareness of police use of force in Latino communities. Police killings of brown people often go underreported, says Eric Rodriguez, Vice President of the NCLR's Office of Research, Advocacy, and Legislation. So now, they're purposely not reporting the numbers of the so-called Latinos being murdered, the high rate. Because just imagine, with all of the protests and riots that have gone throughout these last few years by our Southern Kingdom brothers and sisters because of the police brutality and the unjust killings. Now imagine if it was out there in the open that at the same rate so-called Latinos were being murdered. Now you have these two groups rioting and causing chaos and coming together against the common enemy. Like it was brought out in the Black Indians book. But remember, back then, the aim was to what? Conquer and divide. So they're not going to televise both parties being murdered at this high rate, because then it would unify both parties. And that would be too much trouble. So reading on. In American history, racial conflict has largely played out in black and white. But the history is much more complicated, leaving out Native Americans as well as Asian Hispanics, said Aaron Fountain, historian of Judaism at Anna University. Americans don't see any kind of historical context when Latinos are victims of state violence, despite the fact that there is historical context there. While blacks and Hispanics have interactions with police at rates proportional to their population, meaning blacks and Latinos have encounters with police at very high rates. It says, according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice Statistics, both groups are overrepresented when it comes to traffic searches and arrests, meaning we're the ones targeted when it comes to traffic searches and being arrested. Hispanics, for example, make up 17.6% of the U.S. population, but represent 23% of all searches and nearly 30% of arrests. Among minorities, the rate of police killings for Latinos is second to those of African Americans. As of today, an estimated 94 Latinos have been killed by police in 2016 alone. So in 2016, 94 Latinos were killed by police, making up 16% of the 585 police-involved killing this year. In contrast, people who are Black or African American are only 13.3% of U.S. population, but 144, look at that number, 144 Black Americans have been killed by police in 2016. So the two people, according to statistics, which we already knew, but the numbers don't lie, the two groups who are always being killed and targeted, here you have here on record, is Blacks and Latinos. So Deuteronomy 28:16, cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field. Anywhere we go, we're cursed. Everyone's out to get us because we're the children of the Most High. But we're both going through this together. The scriptures say Israel and Judah were oppressed together. And it's happening to this day. Moving on. I'm going to skip this one here. Okay. Deuteronomy 28:61 says, also, every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of the law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. So now this is a Native American Aztec people of Mexico dying of smallpox introduced by the Spaniards, and this is copied from the Codex Florentine. So the image we're looking at right here is from the Codex Florentine. And we all know about the diseases, the smallpox, the measles, the fevers that were brought by the Spaniards and killed thousands and thousands of Native Americans. So they fit Deuteronomy 28:61. So far they have no problem linking up and lining up with the curses of Deuteronomy chapter 28. Deuteronomy 28:37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. So we are an astonishment. We are a proverb and a byword. Look, this here is the Cleveland Indians logo. To this day, they use this logo. And to this day, Native American tribes protest this logo because they feel it's racist. This is the Cleveland Indians logo. Tell me they don't fit this curse. Watch. Now, this is actually on the NBCSports.com website. This is actually on NBCSports.com. So it says, you've heard me go on and on about Chief Wahoo before. If you think I'm just being an alarmist, liberal pansy about it, however, I'd ask you to educate yourself a bit and understand what Wahoo is really all about. You can do that by reading my friend Peter Patako's excellent article about it in the latest edition of Cleveland Scene. Now, skip to the red. It says, when people look at Chief Wahoo, they think baseball, says DiBiasio. He calls the issue one of individual perception and explains that the franchise's acknowledgement to the sensitivities involved is evidenced by the fact that it does not animate nor humanize the logo. So they're trying to justify the logo. So what do you see here? You see the image that these Edomites, that these racist Europeans made of our Southern Kingdom brothers. Guess what they did to our Northern Kingdom brothers? The same exact thing. We both became a byword and a proverb and an astonishment. Same thing. Same exact thing. It's no coincidence. Moving on. Who remembers this cartoon? I don't know. there's a few of us who may be old enough to remember this. Look at how they depict the natives. This is Peter Pan and the Indians, right? I'm gonna pause the video there because I'm sure you probably can't hear the audio, but visually you can see how they depict the natives within cartoons, painting their skin red, have them jumping around and dancing around all silly. Even within the cartoons, the same way they did with our Southern Kingdom brothers in the racist cartoons and the racist depictions that they would make. So they became a proverb and a byword and an astonishment too. Okay, so now going back, jumping right back into Destruction of the Indies by Bartolome de las Casas. Now check this out. This is page 42. So let's read Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 53. It says, "And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God has given thee, in the siege and in the straitness wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee." So the Most High, one of the curses that he listed was that our enemies would have us in so much distress that we would resort to cannibalism, to the eating of our own children, our own babies. Now, it first happened in 2 Kings 6:25. Let's read it. "And there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and the fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon the wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, Help, my lord, O king. And he said, If the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn flour or out of the wine press?" Now check this out. "And the king said unto her, What aileth thee?" So the king asked her, "Woman, what's wrong with you? Why are you yelling? What's going on?" And she answered, "This woman said unto me, Give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, Give thy son, that we may eat him. And she hath hid her son." So Deuteronomy 28:53, that curse of eating our own children, first happened in 2 Kings 6:25. Mind you, this is what's going on with the Northern Kingdom in Israel at this point. And it's no surprise that fast forward unto the 14 and 1500s, it's the Northern Kingdom again that has to experience the same curse. So this is a depiction. This picture right here to the right is from the book Bartolome de las Casas. Now, what does it say? It says, "And thus there was the most outright and veritable butchery of human flesh, where in his presence children would be slain and cooked, and a man would be slain for his hands alone and his feet. which were considered to be a delicacy. So children would be slain and cooked. So the natives, they were put in such dire straits and hunger and starvation by the Spaniards that they started to eat their own children. And this is what Bartolome drew. If you look off to the right, you see the woman buying human parts. And then to the right, you see a baby being cooked on a grill. Then you see a man on the right side eating a human hand. So here you have Deuteronomy 28 and 53 playing over. It happened in 2 Kings 6 to Northern Kingdom, and then it happened to Northern Kingdom again when the Spaniards came. Yet another curse that lines up perfectly with what happened to the natives. So, in all honesty, how could anybody deny that the natives and the forefathers of so-called Latinos didn't experience these curses? Deuteronomy 28 and 43, it says, "The stranger that is within thy gates shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, thou shalt not lend to him, and he shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail." Meaning, any nation that's around us shall prosper. They're the ones opening up businesses in our neighborhoods. They're the ones who get the loans and the grants, you know. They're the ones who prosper from this system that we call America, not our people. And that's evident. I don't even need a picture for that one. But moving on. Watch this. This is from ihousing.org. Home ownership by race and ethnicity. So this was a figure made in 2016. A median household income by race and ethnicity. So here we have, okay, white, non-Hispanic, it's in the blue, 80,000. Black, non-Hispanic, 49,000. American Indian and Alaskan Natives, 50,000. Asian, 96,000. Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, 67,000. Hispanic, 56,000. So you see the curse of us being the tail and not the head right here within the figures. Who has the lowest numbers? Black, American Indian, and so-called Hispanics at 49,000, 50,000, and 56,000. Now that's home ownership by race and ethnicity. Let's go into widest and smallest home ownership gaps. These are the cities: Minneapolis, Albany, Buffalo, Salisbury, Bridgeport, right? What do you see here? White ownership, 74% in Minneapolis, 24% black home ownership rate. So the gap between white and black in Minneapolis is 50%. That's huge. In Albany, New York, white 68%, black 20%. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, 76%, black home ownership rate 34%. If you see the ownership gap, they're huge: 50%, 48%, 44%, in the 40s. So even the statistics will show that we are the tail. These are just some more charts. I'm not going to go through that chart. This is okay. The home ownership rate for Hispanic householders who can be of any race, 46.3%, was not statistically different from the third quarter 2017 rate. So if you see here, non-Hispanic white alone in the third quarter, fourth quarter, in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, the white homeownership percentage, it's all in the 70s, all in the 70s. It says black alone, all in the 40s. Hispanic alone says all in the 40s. So black and Hispanic, once again, we're the tail. This here is another, I'm going to skip over this. I'll read it. It says, this is from aspeninstitute.org. So is racial gap business ownership? Business ownership. And so this is the sources, the author's analysis of data from the U.S. Census Bureau. So it says one of the reasons for the racial wealth gap faced by Latinos and African Americans is their relatively low levels of business and financial assets, which provide greater diversification and higher average returns over time than tangible assets such as homes and cars. As documented by the Center for Financial Household Stability at the Federal Reserve Board of St. Louis, Hispanic and Black Americans have levels of net worth that are only 1/10 of those held by white Americans, and fewer of their assets are in the form of business assets. Specifically, white and Asian Americans hold 1/3 of their assets in business and financial assets. Hispanics and Blacks hold only 50% and 8% respectively of their wealth in these forms. So even when it comes to business ownership, once again, Blacks and Latinos, we're the tail. Numbers don't lie. I'm going to skip over this. This is going into the same thing. Demographic of, diversity among small business owners. Once again, if you see the chart, Black and Latino, we're the tail again. So Deuteronomy 28:45. Moreover, these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee until thou be destroyed. So now I went through many of the curses showing how it does fit natives and Latinos. So if nobody could possibly bring up the argument that they don't fit the curses. Now, in the beginning, I said I was going to address what that brother said about so-called Latinos or so-called Puerto Ricans claiming or people claiming them to be white. Here's the thing. There's a deep history behind that. And I'm going to go into it. I may skip through some of these slides because it's a lot. So now, if you read the title, it says, How Puerto Rico Became White. An analysis of racial statistics in the 1910 and 1920 census, right? Paper prepared for presentation at the Center for Demography and Ecology, University of Wisconsin-Madison, February 7, 2006. So, and this isn't even a finished work yet, but I'm going to summarize what it's speaking of. It's all in the title. It says How Puerto Rico Became White, because on record, according to the U.S. Census, Puerto Ricans in the majority are listed as white. There's a reason for that. It began with the 1910 census to 1920, where in order for on paper to, in order for the whites to seem like they're the majority on the island of Puerto Rico, then the papers had to reflect that. And so what they started doing was marking down the majority of Puerto Ricans on the census papers as white. And so from 1910 to 1920, the census listings changed. You had Puerto Ricans listing themselves as Black or as Native. Then after 1910, the Census Bureau behind their back switched it and was listing them as white. So that way, on paper, it could seem as if Puerto Rico is majority white. So I'm going to skip through a few of these because it's a lot to read. So I'm going to hit the key points. Uh, well, you read through some of these, you see it talks about fertility and fertility rates. So it breaks down and it shows how it would be impossible for whites to be the majority in Puerto Rico when the fertility rate of white people on the island is much lower than everybody else. So the so-called Puerto Ricans being listed as white is not due to fertility. Okay, so okay. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm gonna skip through a few of these. Here we go. Watch. So it says the set of edited census forms provides clues to the tacit racial logic of census agency personnel who use the bureaucratic discretion to quote unquote correct the classificatory decisions of enumerators. We identified all cases where the race field was edited, where the race field within the census was edited in the 1910 and 1920 public use samples of Puerto Rican census and compared enumerators' racial classification with the subsequently entered quote unquote corrections. So it says analysis of the census forms where racial classification was manually changed by census personnel produced two striking findings. First, edits of the race field on census forms were much more common in 1920 than in 1910. In 1910, an estimated 1,700 out of 1,165,379 census forms had the race field edited. In 1920, an estimated 20,485 out of 1,365 census forms had the race field edited. So we see here that from 1910 to 1920, the census workers were changing the racial category and they were putting white. Why? Because they wanted white to represent the majority of the island, although they were the minority. So, socio-cultural hypothesis. Having ruled out demographic trends and institutional bias as the main engines of whitening. Did y'all read that? It says, as the main engines of whitening, changes the way race was reported on census forms between 1910 and 1920. Remains as the most plausible explanation for the observed statistical whitening of the island. I'm going to skip forward. Here we go. The possibility that social definitions of race were changing in early 20th century Puerto Rico, also posited in the 1940s by an American sociologist, Rogler, 146, noted that the rapid decline in Puerto Rico's non-white population was probably the consequence of changing race conceptions, or more specifically, the social definition as to who is a person of color. In other words, these percentages would suggest that many persons of color are moving into the white race. Perhaps because this observation is embedded in a lengthy discussion of Puerto Rico's quote-unquote absence of marked race prejudice, the putatively optimal moral conditions for race mixture. Duaney takes Rogler to task for suggestions that Puerto Ricans did not and do not differentiate between whites and blacks. The Puerto Rican scheme of racial classification is primarily concerned, perhaps even obsessed, with distinguishing various shades of skin color. So what was happening Whoever was light skinned, they would write down white. Whoever was dark skinned or dark skinned, they would mark as black. Whoever was in between, they would mark as white or mulatto. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Our findings to date lend empirical support to those who have speculated over the course of the 20th century that the growth in the white population of Puerto Rico was both a product and a reflection of the influence of whitening ideology on the island. So that's why most Puerto Ricans on the census on record are listed as white, not because they are white, but because the white owners of the island, the white owners of the Census Bureau are marking everybody as white to make everyone think that the island is a byproduct of Spaniard descendancy, when that's not the case. So, reading on. But our analysis suggests that the mechanism through which whitening ideology exerted its effects was not straightforward as most existing accounts suggested. Official statistics describing the whitening of Puerto Rican population did not simply register an increase in interracial unions in their progeny. Whitening was not the demographic process that both its advocates and critics tended to assume. So you had people trying to say, well, it's majority white because people are mixing in with the white. So they're bringing out that no, that wasn't the case. It was simply that the racist Census Bureau was marking down everybody as white. So that's why you have these people that look at the census and say, well, if Puerto Ricans are our people, how come they don't claim it? How come they claim white? No, we don't claim white. It's Esau that claims us as white. It's Esau that wants to have us on record as white, especially on our island. And these are the sources that were used. All right. I'm gonna skip through a few of these. This is just a picture of me and a brother Wanya Sap when we took our Despierta documentary and presented it in San Antonio University. This is the professor Raynell from Utuado, Puerto Rico, right? He's the one that houses the stones that were found on the island of Puerto Rico, which have Hebrew writing on them, right? So this is the brother that we worked with. And so I'm just going to go a little bit into the stones. I'm going to try to hurry it up because I see it's already 10:30. I'm going to skip past some of the videos because I know the audio. Wait, Abiyashaya, real quick. Can you ask them if they could hear this? If it's loud enough? Let me know if you hear me, Abiyashaya.
I can hear you, Adawan. I'll ask him.
Okay, let me know how this sounds.
If brothers can hear, say Khan. If not, just let us know you can't hear. Yeah, I can't hear either, Adawan. We're going to have to figure out the yeah.
Okay.
Try making it. Can you turn the sound up on your on that?
Yeah, it's all the way up.
All the way up. Okay.
I think it's. Hold on, let me see something real quick. Let me know if you hear anything now.
You could tell that it gets louder, but I don't think. Well, somebody said la'ah, but somebody else said Khan. So
Okay.
I can hear it a little bit, but not too much.
Okay. I'm gonna just let this play, and I'll just elaborate.
Kind of low.
Excuse me, Salat. So basically, I don't know if everybody heard what the professor was saying. So, well, that's a clip from my documentary Despierta, right? What he's going on, what he's going into is the history of the stones. And so he was gonna go into breaking down how on one of the stones there was a word, and that word was Hanoah. Now, the only place on a planet Earth that has any place named Hanoah is in Israel, particularly in the territory of Ephraim. So that's the history that he's going into. So uh, now, in recent times, this year, he actually had the stones tested. So this is a collection of pre-Columbian objects of Puerto Rico are examined at the University of Haifa in Israel, right? Jewish Press, July 14th, 2019. So the professor took the stones with Hebrew writing on them to Israel for them to be examined. So now check this out. It says the secret collection of mysterious objects of art from Puerto Rico, which in the past were made by members of the 10 Lost Tribes, has come one step closer to a solution. Dr. Iris Groman Yaroslavsky from Haifa University examined the objects in depth in her laboratory. Her findings confirm that the objects were carved in the 16th century and that they are not a modern forgery, so they're authentic. And she also discovered evidence showing that some of the objects were coated with gold and red paint. This is definitely one of the strangest and most fascinating stories I've participated in, confessed Dr. Groman Yaroslavsky. To date, we have not found any similar objects of carved stone art from this region of America, and that is why many researchers assumed they should be false. So now, if you read down here, you had Padre Nazario, who was a priest at the time, right? And he was given the stones by an elder Taíno woman. She told him where the stones were buried. Now, he believed that the natives were of the 10 tribes of Israel, but he believed that they came through the Bering Strait, right? Which is just a theory and there's no evidence for. So, although he believed that the natives came through the Bering Strait, he did believe them to be from the 10 tribes of Israel. So, I'm going to skip on to the next. Okay, so now, over the following years, different researchers raised several suggestions about the stones and the engravings they carried. Some suggested that while some of the stones are authentic, others were forged by the local population in the 19th century. When they saw the great interest that the statues had aroused, other scholars claimed that all the statues were forged and that they were probably made by Nazario himself or by others. There was also no writing agreement on the engravings. Some experts claim that the writing system was similar to Sumerian. Others considered that it was closer to Phoenician and so on. After long research, Rodriguez arrived at Dr. Groman Yaroslavsky's clothing wear analysis laboratory at Haifa University. The unusual laboratory specializes in microscopic exams that reveal how various objects were made, what tools were used, if techniques and tools are old, and so on. The microscopic tests conducted by Dr. Groman showed unequivocally that the stones were carved in ancient times. So, turns out that the Hebrew stones found in Puerto Rico, came out to be real. They came out to be authentic. And this is just this year, in 2019, that they were tested. Many universities for hundreds of years thought they were fake, wrote about them, wrote articles saying they were fake, but finally this year they were tested and they came back to be authentic. And they were tested in Israel. So there's no denying. And these stones were carved by native Tainos of Puerto Rico. So why isn't this information brought out? Why is this information ignored by those who teach that the natives within the Americas and the Latinos of native and Negro descent, they teach that they're not Israelites? See, there's too much information. Now, this is a close-up of some of the stones. On the right, you see some gold deposits within the stones. On the left, you see a figure, which within the article, they say that this is like a Mitri-like headgear and with a long tunic. Here you have a close-up, and on the right, you see some Hebrew letters carved into the stone. The information is out there. I'm gonna skip past that. Okay, so now this is just another article you can look up. Firekeepersinternational.org, firekeepersinternational.org, and it goes into the stones being tested again. So if you want, you can copy that source up here, which speaks on the stones as well. Now, me and the brother One Yawasop, we were the first ones to bring this information out in 2015 or 2016. And so, all praises to the Most High that now these stones are gaining more attention, and they're finally have been authenticated. So there's no denial that the natives who carved them on the island of Puerto Rico are indeed Israelites. So I believe I'm nearing the end of the presentation. So just gonna go through a few more slides, right? So this is a history book. It's called The 10 Tribes of Israel, or the true history of the North American Indians, showing that they are descendants of these 10 tribes. Now, this is primary source edition. If ever you hear anybody mention primary source, understand that a primary source is the best source of information that you could get in whatever topic, whether it's Israelite history, Greek history, Roman history. Nothing tops primary source. So let's see what's inside. So it says Reverend James S. Milligan writes from Argyll, New York, May 13th, 1853, to a friend in Allegheny, PA, having in my possession a very curious relic, or facsimile of a relic of that ancient nation, the Jews. I take the liberty of addressing you in reference to it, in order that I and others may have the benefit of your opinion concerning it. That to which I refer is the facsimile in block 10 of a silver coin found last summer in Michigan. So this coin was found in Michigan, about 20 miles from Detroit. Where's now Wyatt? This is your state, King. Detroit, Michigan. It says 2 feet under the surface of the earth. The coin is about the size of an American $50, not so great in circumference, but thicker. On one side is represented the censer with smoking incense with a Hebrew inscription, Jewish shekel. On the other also is a Hebrew inscription, the Holy Jerusalem. So this coin in 1853 was found in Detroit, Michigan, saying the Holy Jerusalem, with a representation of an olive tree or perhaps palm tree. The original piece was found in possession of Dr. Duffield, Detroit. Is it not more possible that this shekel of Israel was lost by Indians? And is it not another evidence that they are descendants of the 10 tribes of Israel? So a coin was found in Detroit, Michigan in 1853 that said Holy Jerusalem. So we have to keep in mind that outside of Israel itself, America has the most Hebraic artifacts ever found outside of Israel itself. This is page 14. The Reverend W.M. Smith, a Presbyterian minister among the Indians, who has finished the translation of the New Testament in the Mohegan language, told the writer that he had for years labored to make a paradigm of the Mohegan verb. At length it struck me that it was cast in the Hebrew mold, and I made this one, which I will show you. It was printed on a large sheet, and any Hebrew scholar would at once recognize the suffixes and affixes of the Hebrew Bible. At the time the writer heard this, Mr. Smith was in Albany, superintending the publication of the Mohegan Testament. Several years before that, the writer of this article had seen a grammar of the Chilean language, the Indians of Chile, and the verb was cast in that Hebrew mold. No Hebrew scholar could doubt this. It may be said that Chile is South America, very true, but let it be remembered on our side that Hebrew immigrants had been in America 500 years before Christ, and of course the Mexicans are descendants of the Hebrews. If it be true that the Chileans are, Judge Breckinridge, who was secretary to the legation to Mexico told the writer that the language of the Mexicans was a very jingling language, great many consonants and few vowels, and that it resembles the language of the Tartars. Their usages indicate the same thing. First, they have a long festival in the spring, the time of the year the Jews kept their Passover. Second, many of the Indians, especially those of western Pennsylvania, 70 years ago, did not eat of the sinew that shrank. If you know in the scriptures, our forefathers made it a custom to not eat the sinew, that tiny little nerve, like when you, let's say you eat chicken thighs or whatever, it has that stringy little nerve. Forefathers never ate that, that part of any animal. In order to show our respect to our forefather Jacob, when he wrestled the angel and the angel touched the hollow of his thigh. And so after that, Jacob walked with a limp. So in honor of our forefather Jacob, our forefathers made it a custom to not eat the sinew of the thigh of any animal. Okay, I'm gonna read down. It says, they make a tent and enter that tent to purify themselves. Sixth, one tribe at least has a box in which is a copy of the parchment which they keep most sacred. This the writer had from Mr. Shannon, a very respectable gentleman, who said that after great persuasion they showed it to him. It was written in large letters with blue ink. Mr. Shannon was not a Hebrew scholar and did not know what language it was. Seventh, inscriptions. The writer will speak in the first person, as is customary now. In going down Lake Champlain in December 1832, I was detained by an accident which happened to the steamboat at Lake Ticonderoga. There I discovered near a small village Hebrew letters on the rocks. Hebrew letters on the rocks. At first, I thought they were the marks of feet upon the rocks, which Mr. Moore speaks of in his geography, but on reflection, I saw that some were Hebrew sheens, meaning the Hebrew letter Shah. They were large letters. So those were written attestations, written accounts of the natives of Chile, the natives of North America, and the natives of Mexico, with their Hebrew artifacts, their Hebrew customs, and the Hebrew language, right? So now I want brothers to take a look at this, right? Now, I just recently came across these, so I just added this to my PowerPoint. And we know that according to scripture, the Levitical priests wore mitres. And aside from the mitre, they wore the breastplate. And what was on the breastplate? 12 stones, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. But we know that during the split, that Jeroboam made priests out of other tribes, which was going off, of course, but Northern Kingdom still kept that custom, even when they came over here to the Americas. So here you have, this is a Museo de Arqueología in Copan, Maya, Honduras. So these figures are in Copan, Maya, Honduras, in their museum. So here you have natives. What's on their head? Mitres. Mitres on their head. What do they have on their chest? A breastplate with stones on. The one on the left, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Pretty ironic, right? Because it was 12 stones for the 12 tribes, but then 10 tribes came over here. And so it wouldn't be too funny that, he has 10 stones of what represents 10 stones on his breastplate. And I'm talking about the rounded ones, because the other at the bottom it looks more like it's like more like bell figures, like the priests were ordered to wear at the bottom of their garments. So you got this one on the left has a representation of 10 stones, which, you know, if you speculate, represents 10 tribes which came to the Americas. So you have a replica, a representation of the breastplate and the mitre worn by the natives. Here's another one. And this figure here also has 10 round stones on the breastplate. And he also has a mitre upon his head. So you tell me, if they're not Israelites, how come they have Israelite items, Israelite regalia on that we could clearly find within our Bible, our Torah? Here you have the mitre and the breastplate. All right, that's it on my presentation. I don't really want to touch too much on this here. This is just a comparison of the ancient Hebrew alphabet as compared to the alphabet that was found amongst some of the Amazonian tribes in Brazil. And so the arrows are pointing at the similarities, and it's the same exact letters, the same exact alphabet that are found amongst the natives of Brazil. So, in conclusion, at the end of the day, there's overwhelming evidence to prove and to showcase that the so-called Latinos of native descent, the so-called North American Indians, are beyond a shadow of a doubt descendant of 12 tribes of Israel. There's historical documentation, as I showed. There's archaeology to prove it, as I showed. And most importantly, they fit the curses, as I also showed. So I know I was kind of long-winded. It's about to be 11. Hey, but I told brothers before when I asked if if y'all would be interested in me showing a presentation, y'all said "Con," and I told y'all it was over 80 something slides. So I hope brothers were edified and were able to learn a few things and bring a little more, shed a little more light on the history of the natives and how they are indeed descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. So I'm gonna be ending. I'm gonna be exiting the PowerPoint now. I'll be a Shia.
Con out of one con. And if that's it, man, thanks brothers for tuning in. And most high willing, we see brothers next week for the brother Pawar when he gives the class on the shield. So shalom.
Ask anybody if they have any questions.
Any brothers, if y'all got any questions, post them in the in the chat.
Hey, I'll be a Shia. I hear sleepy voice.
Huh?
I hear it sounds like you got the sleepy voice.
Oh no, that's my my little princess, man. She's going crazy.
Hey, if nobody has any questions, I guess we can continue to go ahead and close out.
Yeah, no brothers. No brothers posted any questions. They're just saying, telling you great presentation.
All right, Akim. So, most high willing, next so-called Thursday, we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program and going into another lesson. And yeah, stay tuned. Quizzes to come.